The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Has effectively admitted that his carbon tax has not worked, and therefore he needs to triple it. According to the Liberal Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador, the forthcoming hike in the carbon tax will mean that the total cost for a Newfoundland senior living in the countryside on their heating bill will have been 80%. Canadians cannot afford that. But just for clarity, if you are a Newfoundland senior, how much will your home heating bill rise as a result of the forthcoming hike in the Liberal carbon tax?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, like all parliamentarians, we have each heard stories from Canadians who are struggling with the high cost of living, with the inflation that's been caused by the global crisis. That's why we're putting forward concrete measures that are going to help Canadians. We're going to double the GST tax credit that's going to hit millions of families with extra support. We're delivering on support for low-income families on dental, and we're also moving forward with support for low-income renters. The Leader of the Opposition has an opportunity to support these measures and get help directly to Canadians. I hope he does exactly that.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, the Leader of the Liberal Party has an opportunity to respect the fact that heating your home in January and February in Canada is not a luxury. And it does not make those Canadians polluters. They're just trying to survive. This from a Prime Minister who burned more jet fuel in 1 month than 20 average Canadians burn in an entire year. So will the Prime Minister ground the jet, park the hypocrisy, and axe the tax hikes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we're going to continue to stay focused on direct and real help for Canadians, responding to the challenges they're facing with meaningful measures that are going to help millions of Canadians in the middle class and those working hard to join it. If Canadians had followed the advice of the Leader of the Opposition and invested in volatile cryptocurrencies in an attempt to, quote, opt out of inflation, they would have lost half of their savings. Mr. Speaker, responsible leadership means stepping up for Canadians and being there to support them. Will the Conservative Leader support our measures to support Canadians?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
We will not support tax hikes on Canadians. Speaking of tax hikes, they plan to raise taxes on paychecks. Now, yesterday, the Finance Minister claimed that all the EI tax hikes that they would collect would go to EI benefits. In fact, I looked it up. Over the next 3 years, they're going to collect $10 billion more in EI taxes than they pay out in EI benefits, allowing the Prime Minister to grab up the difference and use it to feed his insatiable spending appetites. Canadians can't afford a bigger bite off their paychecks. Will the Prime Minister cancel his tax hikes on Canadian paychecks?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think in this House it's important to look at the facts. And the facts are that when the Leader of the Opposition was the Minister responsible for employment insurance, premiums were 20% higher for workers than they are now. That's right, workers paid 20% more. That's why we're continuing to move forward to support workers. On the issue of the CPP, we promise to be there for workers as they become seniors to help them with their retirements, and that's exactly what we did. And in regards to pricing pollution, we promised it would no longer be free to pollute anywhere in this country, and it no longer is. That's what we're focused on.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Prime Minister is quite wrong. Today, payroll taxes on the average $60,000 a year worker are about $700 higher than when we left office. And by the way, we left with a balanced budget. Now he wants to raise those taxes even further. Bigger bite off Canadian paychecks at a time when inflation is at a 40-year high, when students are forced to live in homeless shelters, and when home ownership rates are at the lowest level in a generation. Doesn't he understand that now is the worst time to raise taxes? Will he cancel those tax hikes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition wants to go back in time. Let's look at what he was doing when he was in government. He continued to deliver child benefit checks to millionaire families, which we ended when we took office. And then he voted against raising taxes on the wealthiest 1% so we could lower them on the middle class. And he voted against a Canada Child benefit that delivers hundreds of dollars a month, tax-free, to every Canadian family. We've seen where this Leader of the Opposition stands. On this side of the aisle, we're going to stay focused on helping Canadians.
The Liberals have no climate plan. What they have is a tax plan that has failed to reach a single solitary environmental target that they have set. Meanwhile, gas prices have hit $2.40 a litre in Vancouver. This is the same city which is the third most overpriced real estate market on earth. In other words, people can't afford to drive, they can't afford homes, and with food prices rising faster than in 40 years, they can't afford to eat either. Will the government show some compassion for British Columbians and Canadians and cancel its plan to triple the tax?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives don't have a climate plan. All they have is a plan to take away $1,000 checks from families in Alberta and Saskatchewan. And you know what? They don't have a plan to make life more affordable for Canadians either. All they have is a plan to drain our pensions and our EI. Our government does have a fiscally responsible plan to support Canadians with affordability, and we have a plan to act on the climate. Canadians know that, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The only ones draining EI of money is this government. They want to raid the EI fund for $10 billion. Take the money that Canadians pay in EI taxes and spend it on everything but EI. The minister admits she's going to raise EI taxes by $2.5 billion starting on January 1st, with Canadians facing the highest inflation in 40 years, just inflation. With Canadians struggling to feed themselves, what is this government thinking by raising taxes on paychecks?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, when you look past all the huffing and puffing, all the strutting and posturing, here's what's happened this week. The Conservatives have done a U-turn and accepted our targeted and fiscally responsible plan to help 11 million vulnerable Canadian families with GST rebates of nearly $500. Now it's time for the Conservatives to drop their utterly reckless scheme to drain our pensions and EI, and to support our plan to help Canadians pay their rent and take their kids to the dentist.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The government has been draining the paychecks and pocketbooks of Canadians. Just this week, the Angus Reid Institute published a poll showing that 51% of Canadians are struggling to eat. In Canada, a G7 country, the majority of people cannot afford groceries. That is 7 years of this Liberal government. Canadians are out of money. This government is out of touch. Why won't they cancel their tax hikes so Canadians can afford to eat?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
You know, Mr. Speaker, you know who's out of touch? The people who are out of touch are a party that believes it's a good idea to slash our pensions and to undermine the EI system. You know what else is out of touch? It's out of touch not to have a plan to act on climate. And you know why that's out of touch, Mr. Speaker? Because our customers, our clients, the US and the EU, they are taking climate action. They will only buy Canadian products if we take climate action too.
Well, Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the minister totally ignored the question. 51% of Canadians cannot afford to eat. Food bank use has tripled and hits record every single month, according to the Daily Bread Association. Students are living in homeless shelters while they study. This is Canada. After 7 years of this Liberal government, getting worse now under this costly coalition. Will they wake up to what's going on in this country and cancel their heartless tax hikes?
Here. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our government will take no lessons from the Conservatives when it comes to protecting vulnerable Canadians. Our government has lifted hundreds of thousands of Canadian children out of poverty with the Canada Child Benefit. We have lifted seniors out of poverty by increasing the OAS and by reversing the ruthless, cruel Conservative.
The government is causing the cost of living to rise, and the inflationary deficit has doubled the national debt, and according to the PBO yesterday, it has doubled the interest rates Canadians will have to pay on the national debt. That's more than we're spending on the military. And the solution for the Liberals is to increase taxes on seniors and workers. Will the government control its spending in order to deal with the deficit and the inflationary taxes on Canadians? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as usual, the Conservatives don't appear to want to see the facts. The facts are that so far, the federal government has been posting a surplus of $6.3 billion. And the forecast is that Canada will have the lowest deficit of the G7. We will have the lowest GDP debt to GDP ratio, and this should continue this year. The Leader of the Opposition.
More debt than all previous Canadian prime ministers combined. Doubled the national debt. Those inflationary deficits have bid up the cost of the goods we buy and the interest we pay. And now, according to the parliamentary budget officer, we will have to pay twice as much for interest on that national debt, $46 billion, more than the cost of the entire Canadian military. Liberal solution? Higher taxes on paychecks, gas, groceries, and other expenses. Why won't the government cap spending, cut waste, so that it can cancel its inflationary deficits and taxes?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as usual, the Conservatives aren't bothering to even acquaint themselves with the facts. Had they bothered to read the latest fiscal monitor, they would know that so far this fiscal year, the federal government is actually running a surplus of $6.3 billion. The IMF forecasts that Canada will have the lowest deficit in the G7 this year. We have the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7 this year, and our AAA credit rating was reaffirmed earlier this year. We believe in fiscal responsibility, and that's what we're demonstrating.
Canadians must spend on national debt interest, and they're tripling the carbon tax, tripling that tax on gas, heat, groceries, and basically every good that has to be transported from one place to another. Now at a time with 40-year highs in inflation, Liberals want to raise those taxes even further. Our young people who are going to school are living in homeless shelters because they cannot afford the cost of living. Will this government cancel this heartless tax increase?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Actually, Mr. Speaker, for middle-class Canadians, we have cut taxes and made them better off. Today, a single parent in Ontario with 2 kids under 6 and earning $60,000 a year pays nearly $5,600 less in taxes than she did under the Conservatives. And she'll receive nearly $8,900 more through reduced child care fees and the dental benefit. She will be more than $14,400 better off than she was under the Conservatives.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, the Liberals would tell Canadians they've never had it so good. They've never had it so good. Listen, this government is out of touch and Canadians are out of money. Here are the facts. The food bank use triples, hits record almost every month. Daily Bread Food Bank. GTA food banks say they're facing the highest demand in their history. Inflation is driving Ottawa Food Bank to record heights with no end in sight, and students are literally living in homeless shelters while they go to school. And the Liberals think now is the time to raise their energy costs by tripling the carbon tax. Will they cancel this heartless tax hike now?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
You know who's out of touch, Mr. Speaker? A Conservative leader who thinks now is a good time to slash pension savings. The reckless Conservative scheme would cost $3.8 billion a year. So that means the Conservatives are either planning to increase our deficit by $3.8 billion a year or slash the retirement income of our seniors. They need to come clean. Do they plan to slash pensions, increase the deficit, or did they just not bother to think that far ahead?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The answer is neither. Just like when we were in government, we froze CPP taxes and we protected the CPP, increasing its benefits to seniors every single year we were in office. Now, this government wants to raise taxes on those very same seniors. According to the Parliamentary Budget Officer, in every single province where the carbon tax applies, Canadians pay more in costs than they get back in rebates. And it is especially high in provinces like Quebec, where there is no rebate whatsoever, but will have to pay the increased costs the government is imposing. Will this government cancel this heartless tax hike today?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Talk about a centerpiece of the Conservative economic agenda. Recently, the member for Kingston and the Islands asked the Conservative leader directly if he was finally ready to flip-flop on cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. In response, the Conservative leader couldn't even bring himself to utter the words crypto or Bitcoin. Maybe that's because since he offered his reckless advice, Bitcoin has fallen by 56%. It's time for the Conservative leader to apologize to those Canadians who made the mistake of listening to him.